Tiny opens his eyes to a world of agony, feeling as though every bone in his small body has been shattered. He gazes around the cramped, familiar space of a slum hovel and realizes he is no longer on the battlefield. Beside him sits his sister Irina, but her pale face and motionless form fill him with a sudden, icy dread. Memories flood back of a group of thugs beating them both, and how Irina had shielded him with her own body. She had ignored her own severe wounds for days just to ensure he survived, sacrificing her last breath for him. Suddenly, the door kicks open as the same thugs burst inside, their faces twisted with cruel indifference. They kick Irina's limp body aside, laughing as she falls to the floor without making a single sound. One goon sneers that she's already dead, surprised that a simple beating was enough to finish her off. In the slums, even a lifeless body has a price, and they prepare to take her away to sell. Tiny watches them with burning rage, but his weak, childlike body refuses to obey his commands. He manages to lift a trembling hand, reaching out as if to stop the desecration of his sister. Suddenly, a brilliant blue mana glow ignites within his palm, pulsing with a power he shouldn't yet possess. Strength surges back into his limbs, fueled by the future knowledge of the warrior he once was. He screams at the bastards to stop and leaps at them with the ferocity of a wild beast. Tiny slams into the lead goon, pushing him back with a force that defies his small stature. He stands firmly over Irina's corpse, acting as a human shield against the remaining thugs. The goons are furious and begin to kick him relentlessly, but Tiny refuses to budge from her side. Seeing his unnatural tenacity, the thugs eventually give up and leave the hovel in frustration. Left alone, Tiny realizes that things in this life are already turning out differently. He remembers clearly that he wasn't supposed to be able to use mana at this age. In his past life, he was the strongest warrior on the continent, wielding a massive hammer against monsters. He had defeated the Beast Lord solo, but was mortally wounded in the final exchange. An old knight named Asgard had used a magical ring to send Tiny's soul back through time. Now, Tiny vows to change the future and stop the disasters that once wiped out humanity. He seethes with frustration that Asgard couldn't send him back just a few days earlier to save Irina. He chooses to use this chance to properly say goodbye to his sister and prepare for revenge. His target is Wolf, the man responsible for the thugs and the suffering of the slums. Tiny stands in front of Irina's simple wooden coffin as her final rituals begin. Though not biological siblings, their shared black hair and eyes made them outcasts on the continent. Tiny regrets that he never had the chance to repay the immense kindness she showed him. Emma, Irina's friend, notices Tiny's solemn and detached expression, sensing he has changed. He had been found eating soup right beside his sister's corpse, a scene that disturbed Emma deeply. 1 month has passed, and Tiny has spent every waking moment in intense, brutal training. He burns through his mana, perfecting the synchronization between his energy and his physical frame. Now, he stands in front of Wolf's den, ready to take his revenge on the entire organization. A guard tries to slap him, but Tiny catches the man's wrist with a crushing iron grip. He mocks the goon, asking if he truly thought a child would be so easy to handle. Tiny kicks the goon away, feeling thrilled as his mana syncs perfectly with his muscles. He grabs another goon by the leg and begins to swing him like a massive human flail. Most of the underlings are downed in seconds, defeated by Tiny's brutal and efficient combat style. With the small fries out of the way, Tiny turns his attention to the stronger Lander brothers. He backs away from their simultaneous sword strikes, already reading every one of their movements. Tiny punches one brother and kicks the other, sending them crashing into the wooden crates. Finally, Wolf himself emerges from the shadows, his eyes glowing with predatory hunger. Tiny knows Wolf is actually a werbeast, a direct descendant of a powerful royal family. Wolf begins to transform completely, his muscles bulging as he prepares to teach Tiny a lesson. Tiny dodges every claw swipe, moving with a speed that the regular werbeast cannot match. He kicks the beast hard, declaring that it's time for him to be punished for his crimes. Tiny beats the werbeast relentlessly, remembering his companion's advice to beat the beast out of them. He throws Wolf into a wall, causing the structure to crack and reveal a hidden compartment. Something falls out from the cracked wall, a mysterious glowing rock stained with dark energy. Tiny picks up the mana rock, sensing a powerful spirit trapped inside its jagged edges. As soon as he touches it, he sees a vision of a silver wolf in chains, roaring within the rock. He realizes this is an artificial werbeast created by extracting a spirit's very essence. Tiny breaks the dark chains binding the beast, flooding the stone with his own pure mana. The silver wolf spirit steps forward, understanding Tiny's intent to make Wolf suffer properly. Tiny asks if they can form a contract, and the spirit beast gives an immediate, respectful nod. The final stage of the contract is complete, and Tiny officially has a new physical partner. But as the celebration ends, he realizes the people backing Wolf from the shadows are far more dangerous. The dark energy he sensed earlier belongs to the demon followers, a cult obsessed with destruction. As he finds a hidden safe filled with gold, Tiny wonders if he is truly prepared for the war he has just started. Tiny steps away from the hidden safe, his eyes scanning the dark corners of the base for anything he might have missed. He notices a strange, pulsing glow emanating from a crack in the far wall, where Wolf had crashed earlier. Kicking away a pile of loose rubble, he reveals a small, ornate pedestal hidden within the masonry. Resting atop the pedestal is a jagged stone that hums with a mixture of pure mana and a sinister, dark vapor. Tiny realizes this is a spirit stone, a rare object usually found only in the distant forests of Elfenheim. He sees thick black chains of demonic energy wrapping tightly around the essence within the crystal. Reaching out, he touches the stone and immediately feels a cold, vengeful presence reaching back toward his soul. Visions flood his mind, showing a majestic silver wolf being cornered by dark-clothed mages in a forest clearing. He watches as they pierce the beast with dark daggers to rip its spirit essence into the stone. Tiny understands that Wolf had been using this stolen power to forcefully transform his human body. He gathers blue mana into his fist, intending to shatter the demonic chains binding the spirit. With a sharp cry, he slams his mana-charged hand into the spirit stone, targeting the dark energy cracks. The black chains shatter into dust and a brilliant silver aura explodes from the crystal. From the light, a translucent form of a giant wolf emerges, its fur shimmering like moonlight. The wolf spirit gazes at Tiny with intelligence and a deep, ancient sorrow. Tiny speaks to the spirit, asking if it can understand his words. The wolf nods its massive head, its voice echoing directly into Tiny's mind. It thanks him for breaking the chains of the dark mages who imprisoned it. Tiny proposes a contract, offering his mana in exchange for the wolf's strength in battle. The wolf considers his offer, sensing the immense, regressed power hidden within the small boy. It demands only one condition, that Tiny helps it take revenge on the forces of darkness. Tiny agrees immediately, noting that their goals are perfectly aligned. He begins the ritual, channeling his mana into the spirit stone to bind their souls. The energy in the room surges, causing the stone walls to vibrate with the sheer power of the contract. As the ritual concludes, a mark of a wolf's head appears on the back of Tiny's right hand. The giant wolf spirit shrinks down, transforming into a physical form about the size of a large hound. Tiny decides to give his new partner a name that reflects its origins. "From now on, you shall be known as Walling," Tiny declares with a grin. Walling lets out a soft howl of approval, the sound echoing through the empty halls. Tiny turns his attention back to the safely revealed documents, searching for clues about the dark mages. He finds a letter bearing a crest he recognizes, the sigil of a corrupt local lord. The letter mentions a trade of raw materials from the slums in exchange for gold and dark artifacts. He realizes the materials were innocent people from the slums, sold into slavery or experiments. "Walling, it looks like we have our first real target," Tiny says, his voice cold as ice. He packs the important documents and the gold into a sturdy leather bag. Outside, the sounds of approaching guards from the city estate begin to reach his ears. He whistles softly, and Walling immediately vanishes into a silver mist, returning to the mark on his hand. Tiny slips through a secret drainage tunnel, avoiding the main entrance of the base. He emerges in a rainy alleyway, far enough from the base to observe the guards' arrival. He watches as Sir Ram and his men storm the base, finding only the corpses of the bandits. As he clutches the letter from Lord Timon, Tiny knows his next battle won't be in a back alley, but in a noble's court. Tiny stood at the edge of the Timon estate, his eyes scanning the perimeter for any weakness in the high stone walls. Beside him, the spirit wolf Walling crouched low, his silver fur blending into the shimmering moonlight. The boy adjusted the grip on his concealed iron dagger, feeling the familiar hum of mana flowing through his veins. He remembered Lord Timon from his previous life as a man who traded human souls for forbidden power. With a silent signal, Tiny leaped from the roof, descending like a shadow toward the garden's blind spot. He landed softly on the manicured grass, immediately pressing his back against a marble pillar. Two guards paced the veranda, their heavy plate armor clanking rhythmically with every step. Tiny picked up a small stone and tossed it toward a decorative fountain, creating a sharp metallic ring. The guards halted, turning their heads toward the source of the unexpected noise. In that brief moment of distraction, Tiny darted across the open space and slipped through a service entrance. The air inside the hallway smelled of copper and acrid chemicals, confirming the rumors of Timon's experiments. He moved deeper into the basement, his footsteps dampened by a thin layer of magical silence. Tiny reached a heavy iron door and peered through the small observation slit into a laboratory. Inside, rows of glass canisters held pulsing black masses that looked like distorted human hearts. Lord Timon stood at a central table, chanting over a bound commoner whose eyes were rolled back in terror. Tiny knew he couldn't just kill the man, he had to destroy Timon's reputation along with his life. He used his mana to vibrate the door's lock mechanism until it clicked open without a sound. Timon turned at the sound of the opening door, his face twisting into a mask of arrogant confusion. "Who let a gutter rat like you into my private sanctuary?" Timon hissed, raising his hand to cast a spell. Tiny didn't answer, instead lunging forward with a speed that defied his small stature. He kicked a heavy wooden stool into Timon's knees, forcing the noble to collapse forward. As Timon fell, Tiny grabbed a ceremonial sword resting on a nearby display rack. He recognized the crest on the hilt as belonging to the commander of the Royal Guard, a known rival of Timon. This was the perfect tool to frame the assassination as a political hit from the capital. Timon scrambled backward, knocking over a flask of volatile liquid that burst into green flames. "Your secrets die here, along with your ambitions," Tiny whispered, his voice cold as ice. Timon tried to scream, but the silver wolf Walling appeared from the shadows and pinned him down. With a single, precise thrust, Tiny drove the commander's sword through Timon's heart. He left the weapon embedded in the body, ensuring the investigators would find the incriminating hilt. Tiny then turned his attention to the bound prisoner, quickly cutting the leather straps. "Run to the town square and tell everyone what you saw here," he commanded the dazed survivor. The man nodded and scrambled toward the exit, his footsteps echoing through the mansion. Tiny began tossing Timon's research papers into the growing fire to erase any trace of his own presence. Outside, the sound of alarm bells began to ring, signaling that the guards had discovered the smoke. He gathered a few essential documents that detailed Timon's connections to other corrupt nobles. Wallang growled at the door as the sounds of heavy boots approached the basement level. Tiny and the wolf slipped into a hidden ventilation shaft he had identified earlier. From the garden he watched as the mansion was engulfed in chaos, guards shouting orders in vain. One monster was dead, but the documents in his hand proved that the rot went much deeper into the kingdom. He looked at the ring of the Valencia family, knowing it was time to find his next ally. Far away in the capital, a dark figure looked at a shattered soul gem and realized Timon had fallen. As Tiny turned toward the Valencia territory, he failed to notice a black crow with glowing eyes following him from the trees. The black crow perched on a gnarled branch, its glowing eyes tracking Tiny as he crossed the border into Valencia. Tiny reached into his pouch and felt the cold, hard steel of the Valencia seal ring he had reclaimed from Wolf's safe. He noted the prosperity of the Lucentia province, a stark contrast to the decaying slums he had left behind. Wallang trotted beside him in a smaller, semi-transparent form to avoid drawing unnecessary attention from the local guards. Two local thugs from the Lupus family blocked his path, their greedy eyes fixated on the quality of Tiny's travel clothes. Tiny didn't even draw a weapon, simply observing the weak mana flow circulating through their undisciplined bodies. With a flick of his wrist, Tiny grabbed the lead thug's arm and pivoted, using the man's own momentum to slam him into the stone wall. He stripped the unconscious criminals of their gold, noting that even in a holy duchy trash still accumulated in the corners. He entered a local blacksmith shop, seeking to upgrade his gear before meeting the high-ranking nobles of the central castle. The shopkeeper mentioned that Lady Chloe, the Angel of Valencia, would be patrolling the city streets later that afternoon. Tiny remembered her from his past life as the only noble who had treated a slum beggar with genuine compassion. He hurried to the central plaza, maneuvering through the growing crowds of citizens eager to catch a glimpse of the saintess. A grand carriage drawn by 4 white horses entered the square, escorted by elite knights in shining blue-winged armor. Edmund von Lucent, the count's eldest son, rode beside the carriage, his posture stiff with unearned pride. Chloe stepped out of the carriage, her black hair flowing in the breeze as she greeted the commoners with a soft, radiant smile. Tiny bypassed the front lines of the crowd and stepped into the open path of the procession, holding the ring high. The Blue Wing Knights immediately drew their lances, pointing them at the boy's chest for daring to block the lady's path. Edmund yelled at the guards to execute the gutter rat for his insolence and for tainting the air of the saintess. Tiny ignored the threats and locked eyes with Chloe, speaking her true childhood nickname which only her father knew. Chloe's eyes widened as she recognized the ring and the strange ancient authority in the young boy's voice. She commanded the knights to stand down, her voice carrying a divine weight that forced the armored men to retract their lances. Vivian, her personal guard and a blade prodigy, stepped between them, her hand never leaving the hilt of her sword. To ease the tension, Tiny whistled and Walling appeared, transforming from a spirit spark into a small, fluffy blue wolf pup. Chloe let out a small gasp and immediately crouched down, her saintess persona momentarily fading into that of a girl who loved cute things. Tiny used the moment to inform her of the corruption in the Timon estate and the impending demon threat rising in the borders. Edmund, feeling ignored, ordered his personal retainers to seize Tiny as soon as the saintess turned her back. Tiny allowed himself to be led away to a private garden, knowing he needed to isolate Edmund to expose his illegal human trafficking. Once isolated, Edmund struck Tiny across the face, mocking him for thinking a beggar could ever associate with royalty. Tiny looked back at Edmund, his eyes glowing with an intense blue mana that froze the nobleman's blood in his veins. He grabbed Edmund's throat and slammed him onto the marble table, demanding the location of the hidden ledger he used for the Lupus gang. Tiny retrieved the ledger and signaled Walling, who let out a howl that alerted Chloe and Vivian to the garden's location. Chloe arrived to find Edmund's crimes laid bare, his own ledger detailing the sale of slum children to dark magic experimenters. She ordered the immediate arrest and exile of the Count's son, proving that the House of Valencia did not tolerate rot within its borders. Turning to Tiny, she thanked him for his service and invited him to travel with her to the main castle of the Duke. They traveled for 3 days across the beautiful lilac plains, the scent of the flowers constant in the air. Their progress was halted by an elven woman named Irina, a dark mage spy who had infiltrated the region to kill the Radiant Boy. Irina unleashed a torrent of dark flames, incinerating the carriage horses and forcing Tiny to leap into action. Tiny summoned the full power of Walling, the silver moon wolf growing to the size of a house to shield the saintess from the blast. With a single, mana-charged hammer strike, Tiny shattered the dark mage's barrier and sent her spiraling into the abyss. As they arrived at the grand gates of Valencia Castle, the Blue Wing Knights saluted the young boy as the savior of the saintess. However, inside the throne room, Duke Asgard looked at Tiny not with gratitude, but with the cold, calculating eyes of a man who recognized a regressor. Duke Asgard's gaze pierced through Tiny like a honed blade, heavy with the weight of unspoken secrets. The silence in the throne room stretched thin as the Duke finally spoke of things no child should know. Tiny didn't flinch, knowing that any sign of weakness would end his journey before it truly began. The Duke declared that words were meaningless in the face of the upcoming apocalypse and demanded a test of strength. Suddenly, the air grew heavy as the Duke activated a massive gravity-enchanting artifact hidden beneath the floor. Tiny felt as if a mountain had been placed upon his shoulders, threatening to crush his bones into the marble. He immediately activated his mana-body synchronization, circulating energy to reinforce his internal organs. Duke Asgard watched with a smirk, increasing the output of the gravity field to 3 times the normal level. Tiny's feet cracked the marble tiles beneath him as the pressure intensified beyond human limits. Instead of falling, Tiny took a step forward, his eyes burning with the memories of his previous life's failures. The Duke's smirk vanished, replaced by a flicker of genuine intrigue at the boy's impossible resilience. With a final surge of mana, Tiny stabilized his stance and stood tall within the crushing field. The Duke deactivated the artifact and announced that the physical trial was merely a prerequisite for the true challenge. He summoned the vice captain of the Blue Wing Knights, a man known for his ruthless efficiency and legendary swordsmanship. Sir Kalen looked down at Tiny, clearly offended that he was being asked to duel a mere child from the slums. Tiny summoned his massive black iron warhammer, the heavy metal ringing against the stone floor. Kalen drew his slender rapier, the steel whistling through the air as he performed a mocking salute. The Duke signaled the start of the duel, and the atmosphere instantly turned lethal. Kalen moved like a blur, his rapier transformed into a dozen silver needles aiming for Tiny's vitals. Tiny swung the massive hammer not at the knight, but at the ground, creating a localized shockwave. The sudden upheaval of the floor forced Kalen to break his momentum and leap backward to maintain balance. Tiny didn't give him a moment to breathe, charging through the dust with the speed of a predator. He utilized the Hammer of the Fallen technique, a skill from his past life that maximized weight and momentum. Kalen realized too late that the boy wasn't just strong, but possessed the combat instinct of a veteran general. The impact of the hammer against Kalen's defensive aura sent a shockwave that shattered every window in the hall. Kalen was blown back across the room, his silver armor dented and his breathing ragged. Tiny stood in the center of the destruction, his small body steaming as the excess mana burned off. Duke Asgard began to laugh, a deep, booming sound that signaled his approval of the chaos. He declared that Tiny had passed the trial and was now officially recognized as a friend of the Sword Emperor. However, the celebration was cut short as a frantic messenger burst into the hall with a blood-stained scroll. The message contained dire news from the border kingdom of Karun regarding the sudden appearance of a great disaster. Tiny's heart sank as he realized the Karun disaster was happening months earlier than it did in his original timeline. He knew that if the sacred artifact in Karun was stolen, the Kraken would be unleashed upon the entire continent. Tiny immediately requested permission to head to Karun, knowing only he had the knowledge to stop the thieves. Sir Kalen, now recovered, argued that sending a child to a disaster zone was madness. Duke Asgard silenced him with a glance, stating that Tiny's eyes held the weight of a man who had already seen the end of the world. The Duke gifted Tiny a fast-travel whistle carved from the bone of a dragon, capable of summoning a high-speed mount. Tiny thanked the Duke and ran toward the courtyard, calling for Walling to prepare for a long journey. As they departed, a shadowy figure watched from the high rafters of the hall, whispering into a communication crystal. The figure reported that the anomaly was moving toward the trap, unaware that the Kraken's awakening had already begun. Tiny set his sights on the kingdom of Karun, knowing the first great disaster was fast approaching. He mounted Walling, whose silver fur shimmered under the morning sun as they prepared to depart. They dashed across the continent at incredible speeds, covering a month's journey in mere days. Upon reaching the port city of Anixen, Tiny sensed a thick, foul mana clinging to the sea breeze. He entered a local tavern to meet Jay, the leader of the Blackwing intelligence group. Jay reported that the high-level mage Gale had vanished while investigating the depths. Tiny adopted a fake identity as a descendant of the Morse family to infiltrate the kingdom safely. During the sea crossing, he detected a group of demon followers hiding among the passengers. Without hesitation, Tiny crushed their ambush and exposed their corruption to the crew. After arriving in Karun, Tiny was granted an immediate audience with King Emud. He requested to join the protection unit for the sacred artifact, Humanitas. Inside the sealed chamber, the massive artifact floated in mid-air, radiating a holy glow. As Tiny reached out, the artifact's barrier vibrated in response to his unique mana. Captain Liam of the Royal Knights tested Tiny's resolve in a fierce sparring match. Liam acknowledged Tiny's monster-like talent after seeing his gravity-defying movements. Information surfaced about a traitorous orc named Hustle who was planning to steal the relic. Captain Truman of the protection unit suddenly revealed himself as a demon follower. Truman released a red orb that summoned a grotesque demon to destroy the vault. Tiny severed the demon's arm in a single blow, protecting the artifact from the taint. Just as Truman fell, the sea erupted with a terrifying roar that shook the entire kingdom. A massive tsunami, dozens of stories high, surged toward the defenseless city walls. Tiny stood atop the battlements, holding the glowing core of the artifact to stabilize the barrier. From the depths of the wave, the colossal Kraken emerged, its tentacles crushing warships. Tiny mounted Walling and charged toward the beast, leaping across the floating wreckage. He slammed his black iron hammer into a tentacle, causing the monster to howl in pain. The Kraken's sonic scream nearly shattered Tiny's focus as he struggled to maintain his grip. Suddenly, Genus appeared from the shadows, his silver mana cutting through the dark tentacles. Together, the knights distracted the beast while Tiny aimed for its central eye. Tiny activated his gravity reversal skill, launching himself like a projectile at the monster. He delivered a thunder strike directly into the Kraken's core, exploding with divine light. The massive creature sank back into the depths as the waters finally began to recede. Tiny collapsed onto the beach, his mana completely drained from the final effort. King Emud personally thanked Tiny for saving Karun from total destruction. As a token of friendship, the king gifted him the legendary Necklace of Mana. With the first disaster averted, Tiny looked toward the horizon, knowing more trials awaited. He had changed the future once again, but the demon army was still lurking in the shadows. The bond between the knights had strengthened, forming a new wall against the darkness. Karun began its reconstruction, its people singing songs of the radiant knight who saved them. Tiny felt the weight of his sister's memory, knowing he was one step closer to her dream. The hero's journey continued as he prepared for the next chapter of the Continental War.